Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Yes, I'm back again, even though I said Happy New Year at the end of the last video. So, transfer window opens Sunday, isn't it? New Year's Day. Obviously, we know that Spurs need, or Conte wants at least a couple of new faces. So, a lot of talk about what there will be finance-wise and what there's to come. Obviously, we still wait to see what happens with the remaining 50 million of the what do you call it? The capital increase that ENIC put in. That has to be taken out by the end of the year. So we shall see. There's 2 days left of that. We'll see what happens with that. But obviously, this is something that's been well publicised. At the time, when was it? Was it May they put out that statement? So we shall see whether that gives them a boost or not, if they take it. I guess we'll find out when the financial report finally comes out. That would be very helpful. I don't know what I'm rolling my eyes. It's just been nice to be able to report on it. When you're constantly being told that, oh no, it's on its way, it's on its way, it's on its way, and it hasn't yet appeared. But there you go. We shall find out, no doubt, about that 50 million then. But it would seem strange not to take it, because for ENIC it increases their share of, or ownership share of the club, which presumably they'd want. And on the flip side, it gives Spurs more money to play with. So, a win-win-win, as Michael Scott says in the office. But, yeah, I don't know. There's always strange decisions made. So we shall find out on that one. Like I say, what I just spent pretty much yesterday and a little bit the day before doing was just contacting every single person that's going to be involved in this transfer window, whether that be agents, whether that be managers, whether that be people connected to families of players, whether that be people within Tottenham, whether it be people within other clubs. So from what I can understand, the thinking is, and like I say, other people have different opinions on this and they'll have different things from their sources, but from what I understand is that Spurs are looking for an attacking player as a priority, whether that be someone that can play as a striker and or winger. Like I've always said, if you could find a player that's versatile enough to do that and also kind of play as an attacking, kind of deeper midfielder if needed, would be great. But just an attacking player is what I'm told. So that's one. And then the other one is, if they can, and I think this would very much involve someone heading out the door, they would also like to bring in another right wing back. And of course, who that player would be, from what I can understand, it would appear to be that they're listening to offers, or they would listen to offers for Emerson Royal. Again, that's kind of dependent on that, I think, purely because of the situation you get yourself in with 4 right wing backs. Obviously, you could loan out Jed Spence, which I think that, if it's going to happen, would be a decision taken towards the end of the window, depending on if anything does happen. But like I say, I think those are the 2 priorities that I think Conte has kind of stressed as an importance for his squad as an attacker. I think you can see that right now, why that's a need, because you've got Richarlison out until at least mid-January. You've got Lucas out for an indefinite amount of time right now with this inflamed tendon, which has become a real problem. And you've got Brian Hill, or Jill, as Conte calls him, who, as much as he praises him, unfortunately, he's not playing football. He's not playing... he just doesn't seem to be trusted yet. He's 21. Physically, of course, he's not a Conte player. And at this moment in time, you'd think that he's more likely to go out on loan next month. I'm sure he'd love to go back to Valencia, obviously. I think he thought he was going back there in the summer. So attacker kind of makes complete sense. I think the wing-back it's just, as I've said a billion times, it's to make the system work. Because the Conte system requires these flying wing-backs. And Emerson was not signed for Conte. He's had a good old stab at it. I do think as a normal right back, I think he's a perfectly good right back. I think, and we've seen that. We've seen that in games where he's played as more of a right back, and I think he's had good games against sometimes the big clubs as well. But ask him to be a wing back and ask him to attack, and it just doesn't quite work. So I think Spurs would listen to offers for him, but of course you've got to see what comes in. And I think that's the thing. It's very. They could easily go out and just get easy. It's not that easy. It's a January window, but they could just go out and get a right wing back. But then if you're going to have 4, then you've just got a ridiculous squad situation. So I do think the wing-back situation will depend on what happens with outgoings, purely from that squad sense. And there's also the homegrown angle, if it was a non-homegrown player that they were looking at as well. So they're the 2 priorities from what I'm told. But on top of that, as this is the January transfer window, although you could say it's the same with the summer, they will look at any opportunities that arise, because sometimes, this is a window where unexpected little kind of openings can happen, where a club at the last minute gets desperate because they want to sign a certain player, so they have to make some money or move things around, and suddenly a player you didn't expect becomes available. I guess last year's a perfect example. Spurs end up with Bentancur and Kulusevski, who Juventus deemed surplus to requirements, and they end up being 2 season-changing players for Tottenham. So when I say that those 2 positions are the priority, you can't rule out other positions because you don't know what will occur. But what I've been told is the summer plan currently, like I say, unless anything changes within this window, is that Spurs would like to nail down a new left-sided centre-back and a centre-back who can play on the right or in the centre if required of a back 3. So that's 2. And also, they'd like next summer to get or to secure the person who will eventually become the long-term successor for Hugo Lloris, whether that is next season or, with a mind to the season afterwards. So the first one, I understand Paratici is a big admirer of, I think you pronounce it Tete, Tete, 22-year-old Brazilian midfielder, currently on loan at Lyon from Shakhtar Donetsk. Scored 6 goals, laid on 3 assists in his 14 Ligue 1 games this season. But since Laurent Blanc came in, he's found starts a little bit harder to come by. I think he's only started something like 2 in the last 6 games, something like that. And I think a lot of Premier League clubs have been alerted to his potential availability next month. So he's maybe one to look on, keep an eye on. Like I say, Paratici is a big fan of his. Obviously, we all know about Ruslan Malinovsky, the Atalanta. He's a more experienced guy. Obviously, he's 29 compared to the 22-year-old Tete. He's obviously been a player of interest for Spurs for a little while, and his contract is out this coming summer. So, of course, financially, and he's not starting too much for Atalanta at the moment, Ukrainian, so potentially that's someone that they could maybe consider. I know the club have liked Martin Terrier. He plays up front for Rennes. Obviously, Spurs got a good relationship with Rennes. That's where Joe Rodon went, although we'll talk about Joe Rodon a little bit later. Terrier can play anywhere across the front 3. Scored 11 goals in 20 matches in Ligue 1 and Europa League, so he's having a very good season. What I would say about him is that Rennes, I think they're 3rd in Ligue 1 at the moment. They turned down some big offers for him in the summer. I think Newcastle, I think I'd heard potentially they maybe even offered as much as something like 40 million and it got turned down. He's got a long contract till 2026, so I just wonder with them in 3rd place, it would just take an astronomical bid, and I don't know whether Spurs pay that sort of money in this window for a player who would not. Oh, it's a difficult one. I suppose it'd be a slight gamble. Whether you pay a big money for a player you know is going to hit the ground running in the Premier League, only because of the way they've been burnt. Obviously, Tanguy came from the French League as well. And they've had a few from the French League over the years. But certainly is obviously a player that I know they like. Paratici, I'm told, talking of ready-made Premier League players, is a big fan of Harvey Barnes at Leicester. Obviously, that's a very difficult one to do. 25 now, 6 goals in 14 Premier League games this month. He'd have a big price tag, you think 2.5 years, proven in the Premier League. I like him. On a personal note, I do really like him. But I struggle to see why Leicester would want to get rid of him. I don't know. But another interesting one, is not left field, I guess, but slightly different because he's playing in a second tier right now, is that I was told that Paratici really likes Ismail Assar, Watford, 24-year-old. Obviously, he played at the World Cup with Senegal, wasn't he? He scored as well. So he's got 6 goals and 3 assists from 19 championship matches so far. And I know, a lot of people going, oh, why would you sign a player from the championship and all this? But what I would say is, I was looking up his stats as well. He's got 18 months left in his deal, but he's also scored 10 goals and 8 assists from his 50 Premier League games, which, bearing in mind, was for a Watford side that was struggling as well. He wasn't doing that for a top team. So he's got 18 goal involvements. So it's almost a goal involvement, not quite every other game, which, isn't that bad. He can play anywhere against the front three as well. Perhaps it could be someone they look at if they can't secure a first choice, perhaps. But yeah, he's not a bad player, honestly. I think sometimes we see these kind of sexy, exciting players for big money, and sometimes those closer at home aren't too bad. Again, not saying that it's definitely a player they're going for, just saying these are players that are liked within the club and by Paratici. Obviously, the one that's going to be linked to every single window when you're talking about attacking players is Wilfried Zaha. I put him in there because I certainly know, I think he's still with Base. I think he's still with CA Base. He's changed a couple of agents in the last couple of years, Zaha. But obviously, he's been someone that, and the reason I say that is because Base have a very strong relationship with Spurs. I think they may also do Porro as well. Yeah, I think they do. So yeah, it's whether of all the times you'd actually think it would make sense for Spurs, it's when Zaha's in the last 6 months of his contract. However, with Conte talking about young players with small wages, Zaha turned 30 last month. He'll be on a hefty wage, I'd imagine, as well. And I guess you've also got the other issue of, because he's in the last 6 months of his contract, from Sunday he'll be able to talk to foreign clubs about a free transfer in the summer, which would be probably much more lucrative for him as well. So yeah, that would be a difficult one. But he's had a decent season. 6 goals, 2 assists in 14 Premier League games as well. He'd add to the homegrown quota as well. I think, attacking-wise, I think he would be brilliant going forward for Spurs. Defensively, and the work rate that Conte would require in that aspect of the game, I don't know whether he quite fits or not. But I've put him in there purely because obviously it's a player that Spurs have liked. And if ever there was a time when financially he's not going to cost a lot of money, it would be now. And I know some people out there really like Zaha as well. Obviously, Spurs have had a big interest in Anthony Gordon at Everton previously. It looks like, despite all of the evident interest and Everton turning down some big kind of money temptation from other clubs, looks like, certainly from the local reporters that end, that potentially he might end up signing a new deal at Everton. Obviously, he's only 21. I think I said this at the time, where I like the idea of him coming to Spurs, but from my point of view, if I was in his head as a 21-year-old playing week in, week out for Everton, why would I want to give that up for a bit part role at Spurs? I think it's a bit too early for him to make that big move myself, and that looks to be maybe what his advisors have told him as well. And then I've shoved him in there because I know some people like him. Adama Traore, he is in the last 6 months of his Wolves deal as well now. And we know, I've told you, Paratici is a huge fan of Adama Traore, and presumably his baby oil as well. His oiled up arms. Do you remember, I think I said I saw him ahead of the Wolves game just staring at him as he was warming up. I was thinking, yep, you like a bit of Adama Traore. He'll be able to talk to foreign clubs as well next month. But there's some talk that Wolves would like to keep him if they can. I don't think he's starting every game. I think he's quite irregular starts now. So he may want another challenge as well.